Hi. I was thinking, we wake up each day and we perhaps have different thoughts, perhaps we're feeling high, low. Today I was thinking back about my journey, my Aikido journey, and not everybody can afford to travel, but I was fortunate enough. I started when I was 23, and this is really just a story about me, my books, Saito Sensei, and some of you will perhaps switch off early and others will be interested to listen. The reason I'm making this film today is because I've sold a few hundred of these books now, and my first book, this is my first book, and I was talked into, tell a bit about yourself, and I wanted to really just make a technical manual, but I was encouraged, tell people how you arrived. So I done that, and I arrived at Aikido not really wanting to do a martial art at all. Anyhow, I did, and those of you with my book will know my full way I got into it. But more importantly, I wanted to write this book and make it the first book that I know of that's in the world, showing you how many styles of Aikido do the same technique, but the techniques are being done incorrect as far as security as a martial art. So if you wanted to pin someone down, keep them there with as little effort as possible on your behalf, there's secure ways of doing the technique. It'll be exactly the same technique as anybody else does in any other style of Aikido, and there's numerous amounts of styles depending on the teacher and how they see the technique to be done. So I wanted to put right what I'd been taught when I met Saito Sensei, and I've said this before, but that when I met him, I thought I had really good Aikido, but it was crap. It was absolute rubbish. Once I was up against his personal deshi, his personal students that lived with him in Iwama, and they would go there for perhaps months, some years, and they were like trying to move the biggest boulder that had ever arrived for you to try and pick up, I remember being gripped on the wrist and beads of sweat pouring out of my head, because as I went to move, the shock of not being able to move, big hands, strong body, young, I'd been doing 10 years of Aikido, I was a Nidan. I'd been following Saito Sensei before on films and with his books. I bought them, I think, around about 1975. They came out in 73 over a period. So I thought I was following him, and I kept this to myself. I didn't want to tell the people in the organisation I was at, or else they might not like me following another master. So I used to keep it to myself, play the films, the old cine films at home. When the wife used to go out, I used to get the films out, play them, and then if it was Ken or Joe, things you could do on your own, you can do taijutsu. I found out after, a few years on. Of course, you can what they call shadow box. You can pretend you've got a partner. And but more importantly, I used to have sliding double doors, and I would have the projector facing opposite the doors, so I could still have it on while I'm outside in the garden in the dark watching the cine film, and then I'd quickly run in, wind it back and watch Saito Sensei do it backwards. And looking back on it, even though I was an adult, I had a mind of a child, because I was convinced when winding the film backwards. Saito Sensei was actually doing it perfectly backwards, and then I would wind it forwards. And this took me to another dimension where I used to just play a part. Let's say I was doing a Joe Saburi, or he was, and I would watch it, I would wind it back and I'd watch him intensely to see if he's doing the same things. Well, of course it's a film, isn't it? How stupid am I? But at that point in time, I wanted to get it correct so much, and I was only a Q grades then when I first had these films. I started in 1973, so 75 when I got the books, it wasn't, I might have been Orange Belt or something. So I was a young, ego-driven Aikidoka that, thought I'd be the best eventually, and, I wanted to train. So I would go outside, do some Joe work or something, I'd come back in, wind it back, as I say, look at it again, and go out there. So what I started doing was, I just put the book down, I would get the Joe and I would, turn it above my head perhaps, and then I would think of how I would do it backwards, and I would keep going like this, and I became the film. And this is how I personally learned. I was saying to my Jane, my partner, this morning, we were doing yoga together. We try to do yoga every morning together before the day really starts. And I was telling her that me being dyslexic, the way I do things is I do it, and I have to keep repeating it and repeating it and repeating it. It's a little bit like what in my days at school, I don't think they make you do it now, but in my days in school we had a big A4 pad, and when we were naughty boys, we had to write lines. I will not do this again, I will not do this. And the teacher would say, do 100 lines saying that you will not throw chalk across the room again, or something like that, or whatever it was. And I was always doing lines. My writing's terrible today, so it didn't improve that. But it's a bit like writing lines, pick the Joe up, ski. How would you go back? Because if you pick it up nicely and you do all the right things and you ski nicely, and then you forget the path backwards, it becomes untidy. And that's how I saw my Aikido path. If I couldn't undo what I'd just done in exactly the same path, then to me, I was being shoddy. I wasn't being correct and perfect. And with all this knowledge, with all this thinking, with all this perfectionists that I was doing, 10 years on, I meet Saito Sensei in New Zealand for the first time, and I was absolute crap. I might not have been crap. He was really amazed that somebody would travel across the world to just see him. He thought, well, he's just a man. Why would anybody travel? So really this story brings me on to one particular time that I was following him. Twice a year, somewhere in the world, I had to see him. It was like an adrenaline rush. I had to get my fix. If I didn't do it, I felt as if my Aikido was falling apart. Was I starting to make up techniques? Was I starting to have thoughts of my own that I shouldn't have, because when I meet him again I'll be totally wrong? Just jumping back a moment about the film and how I thought the mind of a child. So I'd done the first book and I wanted it to be really technical, to show the small changes, not the big changes, but if you put your hand on the back of somebody's head, in Kaitanagi and you put it near the neck and you've got their arm and you throw them for this against somebody who decides to resist, not the perfect uke, the uke who's got also an ego and he wants to, or she wants to fight back. I never found it with ladies, I must admit. Perhaps it's only the men who have got these big egos. Anyhow, if you, in Kaitanagi, you've got your hand near the neck, here, or here even, you will need strength. If you put your hand here on the crown of the head, just here, your hand will slip off if you try to use strength. But if you've got the arm and the crown of the head here, it's like a small compression. The arm is pressing and the head is pressing. It's like a triangular sandwich from the crown of the head to the angle of the arm. You perhaps can see this, but it's a triangle. And Aikido is, as we know, all triangular, circular and square. So I wanted to make this book only technical, but the feedback I've got over the years is how much people have enjoyed listening to my story of how I got into Aikido, and they all find it fascinating. Very rarely do I get anybody talk about the technical. So this led me to make a second book. I thought, once you get the technical, they're not asking about the technical, so if they're not asking about the technical and they're just interested in my story, perhaps I should think about, this second book. And the second book, I'll just take it a bit to the camera, Keeping the Mind of a Child. And this led me to think back of when I had this notion that Saito Sensei was doing the weapons perfectly forward and then he would do them perfectly backwards. And I realised that only a child thinks like that. A child sees clear thinking. If you say to a 7-year-old child or 5-year-old child, come on, we've got to go, we've got 5 minutes, they don't know what 5 minutes is. They're not run on time. Their world's not like an adult's. So this second book was developed really for those who had transgressed through the technical stages, and I wanted to work on the person. Who is this person that thinks like this? Who is this person that's travelled the world since Saito Sensei in every continent there is on the globe? This person is you. It's me. We actually have, even though we're very individual, we have very similar desires when it comes to what we would like out of life. So the second book goes into what I believe I've done and you should do to improve your Aikido. By improving yourself, you will improve your Aikido. Techniques will only get you so far and then they get stuck. Improve yourself, the way you think, the way you criticise, the way you judge, the way you can become at peace. Then you'll find that the mat time is much more precious. The techniques start working better. You start looking at the Aikido that I believe is where Aikido starts. Not at the beginning where we wanted to do the perfect Shihanagi or have great fun throwing people in Kotegaeshi and how high could you get your friend and how much would you resist them or try and be as good as them. So one day there I was going off to see Saito Sensei across the world, and I was going to the USA, New Jersey, and he would do what he called a book signing. And I hadn't thought about this. This is perhaps where I was a little bit gullible. there was a long queue of people, and he was sitting in this very small closet, and people would come in. He would sign their book, one of his books, one of his 5 volumes. This is in the early days before Stan Pranin made the new set. So this was the 5 volumes. They would have one, be very proud. But I thought in my head, why would I go all the way to America and carry, it's quite a heavy book, but carry a book when I'm actually going to see the person to be trained by him? Why would I need a book of him? I need the book when I get back home. So I'm in this row, and I'm the only person, because I wanted just to be in his presence really. You know, on the mat, he's up there, you're down there. It's like an elephant and a flea. Perhaps a bad way of putting it. So I'm in this queue, everybody's getting their book out, and he's got his biro pen and ballpoint, and he's just signing it, stamping it, and with a normal rubber stamp and an ink pad, signs it. Off they come out the cupboard, next one goes in, closet, cupboard, next one goes in, same thing's happening. And I get to him, and I'd actually taken this book here that we've got here, the Book of 5 Rings. I'm not a great reader, never have been. And I was thinking that I should read this book because at the time it was known as the book that every Japanese, doesn't matter whether they're martial artists or not, every Japanese should read the Book of 5 Rings because it's character building. Now I read this book, and that's the only book I had in my hand. So when it gets to my turn to go into the little closet, there he sits. I can still see him today. It's amazing, isn't it? He had his glasses on, his black glasses, and he's there, and he looks at me and goes, "Ah, Tony." He was always so delighted to see me that I get a bit choked, sorry. Sorry. Anyhow, I only had this book. He doesn't understand English, I don't understand Japanese. So I said, "Sensei," and I showed him the book. He opens it. He puts the biro and the ink pad to one side. And he gets out of his case what I didn't know he had. He gets his calligraphy brush and a different stamp, his own personal stamp, chalk, and he signs the book. And here's a signature. He signs it, he smiles. He always thought, why would somebody follow him around the world? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? He's my master. And anyhow, the person behind me, I always remember, as I turned to come out, the row of faces that could see me have the book and him with his calligraphy brush signing it. They were beaming because, not just the biro pen. As I turned again and said, "Domo Sensei," he just puts his pen away, he puts his calligraphy brush away, and his special chalk, puts it back in his little side bag that we would carry then, and then gets his biro and more or less says, "Next." And silly things like that have stayed with me. It's not so silly, is it? Because what a great honour. So this book I shall keep, and I just wanted to really share that story with you. So we'll all have special thoughts and memories. It's sad because I do believe in trying to save the planet, and perhaps we shouldn't travel so much, but you should go and try and do it the most economicalist way you can, but see as many top teachers as you can. Train with as many friendly people as you can, because if they're other Aikidoka, they will be friendly, they will greet you, they will be nice to you. Advance your Aikido and friendship, because when you get to the journey that I've been on to be able to talk to you, what will you have to look back on? What memories will you have? Do as much as you can. Your life will be full and rich. Don't just train in the dojo and have a good time, then go back to your normal everyday week. Make it a life of ambition and a life of pleasure. Do this and you will know that you've had something worthwhile in life. I found Aikido. I went on to Tai Chi, China, blended that with my Aikido. It helps improve my techniques. I do yoga most days because I want to keep my body in good shape. Because my head doesn't think that I'm old. My head thinks that I'm me, I'm Tony. Just because I can't do quite what I used to when I was young doesn't mean to say I can't in my mind. So please, hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see by how many views it gets and how long the duration is. Thank you for listening.